Are you gonna make it happen today? Or will you just settle for another delay? Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Said, are you gonna
So,
wait?
Jesse, why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about today for starters?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the CECRA, which is the commercial rent subsidy that's going to be important to small business owners that have been impacted significantly by COVID-19.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you want to give us just a brief rundown, like what is the program in general, just in real simple terms?
Yeah, just pull up my presentation here.
Okay.
I always get...
Somebody, I think, initially said it's a Canada Rent Assistance Program. And I went, that's the wrong acronym. We can't use that.
Yeah. Can you see my actual presentation, or is it still showing?
It's like presentation mode. So
let's do this. Okay.
perfect. Nice.
Yeah. So this is the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance. So for starters, a lot of people are like, what is this? This is fairly new. The government announced with the COVID-19 subsidies.
Okay.
So we can go to my first slide. So what is the CECRA? So the CECRA is for small businesses, and it provides relief for these businesses experiencing the financial hardship because of COVID-19. So what it's intended for, it offers forgivable loans to eligible property owners, to one that reduce the rent owed by their impacted small business tenants. Two, and it offers them the ability to meet operating expenses on the commercial properties. That can always be common maintenance costs, property tax, etc. This is kind of helps them kind of meet the day-to-day expenses that come with owning these properties, especially with tenants that can't pay the rent anymore. So property owners, to be eligible, they must offer a minimum 75% rent reduction to their tenants for the months of April, May, and June 2020.
Okay.
So who is eligible to apply? I think we kind of get this, I get this question all the time. Is it the property owner? Is it the tenant? So it's actually the owner, so the landlord, the owner of the commercial property. And they can apply if they have one or more impacted small business tenants. So we're going to use this word impacted small business tenants, which I'll go over on the next slide. This is a key word in meeting the eligibility for the CECRA. So eligibility, you would have to enter in or have already entered into a rent reduction agreement for the period of April, May, and June 2020. This needs to state that you're reducing impacted small business tenants' rent by at least 75%. This has to be legally binding contract. And the owner of the property must have declared rental income on their tax return, either personal or corporate, for the tax years 2018 and or 2019.
Can I, Jesse, can I just stop you there for one quick second?
Yeah.
When we talk about, first of all, two things, legally binding contract and also the personal, claiming the income.
Yeah.
How would you define a legally binding contract? I mean, we could almost say something in anything between two parties in writing is sort of a legally binding contract.
For sure. Yeah.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So exactly, Greg. It has to be a written contract signed by both parties. And I would always suggest have a witness there as well.
Okay. And I've also heard with these contracts is you should possess an original signed copy. In other words, if you have two parties, you should have two original signed copies.
Yes.
Each person has that original signed copy.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah? Okay.
Exactly.
So that's what CRA is going to be looking for, right?
Yes, it's not the CRA who's administrating this. It's a CMHC.
Oh, okay.
So
Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll be looking for this from every landlord property owner. Yeah.
Awesome. And then the second question is, and if you're going to cover any of this in the future, just let me know. But there has been talk, and of course we all know that many times people do not declare their rental income. They either do something with it, or they put it in their pocket, or they somehow wash it in other ways, if somebody's renting a commercial, like if someone's a renter in a commercial property, how can they be assured, or does it even matter whether or not that person has declared that rental income?
So this is more for the landlord. So for the tenant, it's not their responsibility to know if their landlord has recorded this on their rental or in their tax return. It's for the property owner applying for the loan. So if they get seen they haven't recorded the income on their tax returns, there'll be consequences on their end. The tenant won't know, so there will be no responsibility falling on them for this.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
Greg, to your point, what happens with a lot of rental income is that it's received in cash,
Yes.
and owners will just pocket it and never record it. The tenant doesn't need to worry about that.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
So moving on to our next slide. So as I brought up, the key term in this in this presentation so far has been impacted small business tenant. So I kind of want to go through what is an impacted small business tenant. So there's a few points here. They pay no more than $50,000 in monthly gross rent in their location. So if it's a tenant who owns franchises or corporately owned stores in a lot of different commercial spaces, they can't pay more than $50,000 in each of their locations in monthly rent. They can't generate no more than $20 million of gross annual revenues. If they're over that $20 million, that tenant won't qualify under the CMHC rules. They must have experienced at least a 70% decline in pre-COVID-19 revenues. So the way that a property owner can apply for the CMHC loan for their tenant is that the tenant needs to attest that they've seen a 70% decline in revenues.
Jesse, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Over what time period would that 70% decline be applied to?
Yeah.
Drawn from?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go through that point further. So if you're a small business, so that you can calculate the revenue loss, so you have to compare April, May, and June 2020.
Okay.
Like we kind of touched over yesterday on the revenue testing on the wage subsidy, it's almost the exact same way you're going to calculate it. You have two ways to calculate it. Either you can use a year over year, so you can use April, May, and June 2019, or you can compare the average gross revenues for January and February 2020.
Gotcha. Okay. So this applies then for people who have opened after April, May, or June in 2019, right? The second bullet point?
Yeah. So this CMHC helps tenants who had to completely close, essentially, because 70% decline in revenue is huge.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be a segment of the market that doesn't meet this criteria. I think for kind of the members of the association, they'll be eligible for this for sure, because a lot of them had to shut the doors.
We were actually forced to close entirely. So you'd have to somehow see 30% gross revenues just out of retail sales that you would have done curbside pickup. And that's such a rarity in this industry, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So that 70% decline in revenue you'll see that with a lot of the members for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So what does the CECRA offer? So as I spoke before, CMHC is the administrator of these forgivable loans to eligible commercial property owners, and the funds will actually be transferred directly to the property owner's financial institution. So for example, if they're with TD, their funds will be directly deposited into their TD business account. So what does this loan kind of cover? So the loan will cover 50% of the monthly gross rent owed by the impacted small business tenant during the 3-month period of April, May, and June 2020. The property owner will be responsible for no less than half of the remaining 50% of the monthly gross rent. So they're not paying no less than 25% of the total gross rent that they would have received. The small business tenant will be responsible for no more than half of the 50% of the monthly gross rent payments. So they won't be paying more than 25% of the total. So how it breaks down is 50% is covered by CMHC, 25% has to be covered by the property owner, 25% has to be paid by the impacted small business tenant.
Gotcha. All right.
The loan forgiveness will be forgiven if the property owner complies with all the applicable program terms and conditions. And this is a major point. This includes they can't recover the forgiven rent amounts when the program's over. They can't turn to their tenant and say, hey,
Right.
you shortchanged me for a couple months. I want that rent back. They can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is there anything in place that can help support that or prevent?
Yeah, if the tenant sees this happening, they can actually go to CMHC.
Okay.
Yeah. So the last slide here is the application process. So the application process, the applications are done on the CMHC website. I put the link there so everyone kind of has that noted. So what needs to happen is the property owner needs attestations from the tenant to confirm eligibility. So they need attestation saying that they've had a 70% revenue decrease. And if they get reviewed, the property owner gets reviewed for this loan and the tenants are found that they didn't have a 70% decrease, they're going to be held responsible for faulty calculations.
The applicant or the tenant or both?
The tenant will be, the tenant will be responsible,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this, and then when we talk about attestation, what format should that take? Is there a form that gets filled out, or is it just?
Yeah, so I'm going to be sending you 2 samples.
Okay.
I'll be sending that by tomorrow.
Okay.
And they can follow those samples. It comes straight from the CMHC website, so members can find it there as well.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. The rent reduction legally binding agreement has to be signed with each impacted tenant to confirm rent reduction. So as we spoke before, they need to have that rent reduction agreement signed when applying, before applying. Yeah. The tenant information is needed, including contact information, registered business name, number of employees, lease area, and the monthly gross rent for the period April, May, June 2020. That's just standard. The information is going to need it for each tenant in order to apply.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's kind of it for the CECRA. The applications have already started.
Mm-hmm.
I opened up on Monday.
Okay.
So I would kind of suggest all members trying to jump on this, start calculating revenue, start having this conversation with landlords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is an awesome program. It looks fairly straightforward. Couple of questions. So does this apply because of the $20 million and the other detail? Would this apply then to somebody in a shopping mall?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They would have to take that up with the mall owner. So
Right.
the landlord. Yeah.
Okay.
They'd have to start that discussion with them. Yeah.
All right. And that can be any size mall. It can be like a huge mall or a strip mall or just any.
Yeah. So that $20 million, if we go back here, so we're talking about the tenant at that point. So the tenant can't have $20 million.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought it was the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because no, that makes sense. All right. So would the tenant then, what if somebody has a franchise of a larger organization? Like, I guess if the franchise is a $20 million operation, is that?
Yeah. So they'll calculate based on the franchisee.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I think everybody will definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Just because franchisees are separate in a sense, because they have to pay their own lease with their landlord.
Yeah.
So they would be separate from that.
Okay.
20 million. Yeah.
Now I have a question for you, because we have sort of a hybrid model in our industry whereby we have many people who have a kind of a landlord-tenant relationship, insofar that you can have a salon that was, as I was saying earlier, kind of somebody gets a space, they renovate it, and then they rent it out to tenants who are sort of chair renters. They may not own the space.
They won't qualify for this.
So they have to own the building. They have to be
they're going to have a lease agreement. So the tenant needs a lease agreement with the landlord. A lot of these chair renters won't have that lease agreement with the landlord.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
So you have to look at the landlord-tenant relationship.
So if they have a lease agreement, though, would they potentially qualify, or?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, if they had a lease agreement, would they qualify?
So the tenant and the landlord would have an agreement. Yeah, if they have an agreement, they would qualify, obviously meeting the conditions with the revenue tests, etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there could be an opportunity then for a renter within a space, because it's always, you can view it as a landlord-tenant relationship.
Yeah, you can do sublease as well. You can do sublease as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting, we should test that out, and I'll see if I can find people who are successful or unsuccessful in it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is completely new. I'm actually working on my first one with a client
Okay.
this week.
All right.
So it's been kind of a learning process because it's not regular. It's not going through CRA. It's going
Right.
through CMHC. But the biggest kind of hurdles I'm seeing is getting those agreements signed with the tenants.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking anecdotally, I can say that many people who are chair renters have a verbal agreement with their operation.
Yeah, we need written agreements at this point. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we'd like to certainly offer out, is some sample written agreements, and I think it's very powerful to have those in
Yeah, I
place.
think we have a question here too.
I do.
How does a program apply to a tenant-landlord relationship if the landlord is an incorporated holding company and the renter is a separate incorporated business, where both share a common director? The same person holds a sole interest in both the corporations and the business. There are two different entities with the entity owning property and the. Okay, so to further kind of your question, are you talking about a holdco opco situation? Holdco owns the commercial property. Opco is leasing the space from the holdco.
It looks like it, because
Yeah.
because the landlord is an incorporated holdco, and the
Yeah.
renter is a separate incorporated business.
Yeah, they'll be eligible. What happens with that though, a lot of the times is where I see is they don't have an agreement signed with the holdco.
Oh,
So
okay.
one thing you're gonna have to make sure.
Talk about.
Yeah. So one thing you're gonna have to make sure is get that agreement signed.
Can it be signed now, or like how does that work? Or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay. All right.
So that relationship, you are eligible for the funding if you have that holdco opco relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And it could be, let's say, maybe a husband-wife scenario where maybe the husband is the operator, and the wife owns the
shares in the holdco.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It can even be this. It can even fall into the same owner. So Sean, for example, if it's Sean holds shares of holdco owns shares of, or Sean holds shares of holdco and opco, but opco is renting the space from holdco. Yeah, that works.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that adds a lot of flexibility into it then, right?
Yeah, exactly, Sean. As long as there's a written agreement. What happens with these related party situations? There's never a written agreement.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We've discovered that, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And Sean, to further your point, obviously you're going to have to meet the revenue criteria, the OPCO will.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the 70% is pretty straightforward. There was just a serious shutdown, so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's especially in the industry, it's been pretty tough for sure.
Yeah, well, there's been no opportunity to diversify. So, there's restaurants could do takeout or delivery. People in the personal service industries just had to not even do anything.
Right.
Except for deliver some retail, which, I mean, most people are in around the 5 to 20, 20% is sort of very high.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, what I've been telling clients is get your books up to date, as soon as possible. Because all these subsidies hinge on some sort of revenue test, especially with the wage subsidy and the CECRA. So get your books up to date. Make sure you have your calculations in order, because it can fall on the tenant, right? As we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
The responsibilities. So. And
that could be we talked about this earlier, but that could be another long-term cost that nobody really wants, right?
Exactly. I know. Yeah, and a lot of these subsidies are going to get audited after the pandemic. So, I mean, we need to make sure that we're all compliant. Compliant is my key word to everybody.
That's right.
So, yeah. So be compliant.
Yeah, no, it's just better, right? I mean, sometimes people look for short-term gains, but ultimately you got to play the long game and just do it right. And then you don't have to worry. You can sleep at night, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have the tax man over your shoulder.
That's right.
They're always thinking about it. Yeah. So always make sure you're compliant, have your books up to date.
Okay.
Revenue tests are all there. You have all those saved. And then the discussion should start being started with the landlords for sure.
Quick question. I always ask this every call we do. Is this a program that people should spend the time doing? In other words, is it worth the time to do?
Yes.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually saving the tenant money.
Right.
Because they're only paying 25% of what they would have been paying for, right?
It's quite substantial, especially if we can make this chair renter situation work for people. There are many people who are sort of desperate because they're an independent operator and they're paying whatever, $1,500 to $3,000, and they literally have no income, and they're getting a shoulder shrug from the people they have to pay it to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's these agreements have to be in place, these lease agreements.
Yeah.
If anyone's obviously not sure, unsure, please contact your accountant for sure. Who's on your file. They should be able to walk you through the subsidy.
We'll provide a link to you as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a question, one more question, and then we should wrap it up. What if the salon continues to charge rent to a stylist? Does that affect the income disclosure during the closure? So
the revenue test is for the tenant.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it won't, the landlord doesn't have to do a revenue test. It's the tenant that needs to do the revenue test.
This particular program compared to the other ones is very separate, right? You've got sort of there's a real distinction between the tenant or the two parties, right?
Yeah,
the one hand on the operator, so like what you say, the operators and the actual landlords are really
exactly. Yeah. So the tenant is responsible for to show that 70% decrease in revenue. The landlord won't have to worry about the 70%. They don't need to show a revenue decrease on their end.
Yeah, and I suppose that makes sense because all of this is not administered by CRA, but rather the CMHC.
CMHC, exactly.
Which oversees this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
I hope that answered your question, Sean.
Think so.
Yeah.
Yes, he says. All right,
okay.
Jesse, I want to thank you once again. This has been a really great session, actually. I think a lot of people can take advantage of this, and I know many people I'm sure will. So I want to thank you so much for this. It's been very useful. Yeah,
more than happy to help. I mean, like me and Eva have been saying for the couple past seminars, we just want to make sure everyone takes advantage of what they can and they're staying compliant with all the rules.
Yeah, because there could be this could save a lot of people for sure, especially this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is a cost savings, huge. This is huge for a lot of business owners.
It is, definitely.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, we'll see you Friday. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, see you Friday. I think tomorrow you have the legal seminar.
Yeah, we have legal stuff. So
yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
Take care. Thanks again.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye.
Are you gonna make it happen today? Or will you just settle for another delay? Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Said, are you gonna wait and sit on your hands? Or will you go and start making out a list of demands? Cause you can make it happen, so choose a bitch.